Hello and welcome to the state I'm in, where every conversation points north. Here, we discuss the topics that Alaskans and perhaps everyone may care about. I'm your host, Manny Coelho, a fellow Alaskan and your guide to the conversations that Alaskans want to hear from the individuals who are leading the way. My guest today is Logan Hufford. Logan is a lifelong Alaskan who grew up in Anchorage. His story and the topic of today's conversation is unlike anything I've had the opportunity to discuss on the show so far: sexual addiction, recovery, and life on the other side of it. This is a sensitive topic, but I believe it's an important one. For Logan, what started off as a private struggle with pornography escalated into a full-blown double life, full of affairs, encounters with prostitutes, and repeated attempts to hold together a marriage and family while everything underneath was falling apart. We talk about addiction beyond shame or morality, how it rewires the brain, damages relationships, and why willpower alone often isn't enough. Logan makes clear that his story is descriptive and not prescriptive. This is how his journey unfolded, but not necessarily a blueprint for everyone. We also discuss what finally forced a turning point, when real change began, and a powerful metaphor that is weaved throughout this conversation, which Logan uses to describe addiction, which is being trapped inside a cave, and what it takes to find a way out. Logan has shared his story on podcasts all around the country, offering hope to those who feel alone or trapped in their addiction. And it's a privilege to be the first Alaska-based podcast where he shared it. I'm especially excited to connect listeners to the recovery resources like Prodigals, located right here in the state. This conversation is for anyone who feels too far gone, and for those who are already on the road to recovery, wondering if lasting change is possible. And now, my conversation with Logan Hufford. I mean, you grew up here. You grew up in
Mhm.
Alaska. Have you been in like Wasilla area your whole life, or did you
No,
move
I
around?
I grew I grew up in Anchorage. My
Okay.
wife and I both grew up in Anchorage, and ironically, we lived like 35 minutes away from each other if you drove, and then we lived about 35 minutes away from each other if you walked, because we lived on two opposite sides of a couple mountains.
Gotcha.
So we both grew up in Anchorage. She on the south side, me on the east side, and then we got married in 2011. And then I was 20, she was 21. We moved out to the valley pretty quickly, about a year later. And so
Okay.
we've been out here since 2012. Settlers Bay for 8 years, and then we live over right between Palmer and Wasilla now for
Okay.
the last 5 years.
Cool. We've got yeah, my wife and I, we got married in 2010, so it's been about the
Okay.
same time frame. I think we were pretty close in age, maybe just flipped. I think I was 22,
Okay.
she 21 or something like that. We got married kind of young too, but
Yeah. And our
uh,
kids are similar too. We've got, yeah, obviously 4, but
mm,
yeah, our oldest is 13, our youngest is 9. So
okay,
13, 12,
cool.
11, 9.
Fun ages, man. A little bit, it's getting a little bit more challenging with with my oldest daughter, seeing
Well, you
more
got a
act.
girl, I've got only boys, so
It's
you've
true.
got a preteen girl, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in her good graces though. I think I'm sure she's embarrassed by me, but she's she still keeps me in the loop, talks to me about boys and school drama and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So those are fun ages though, because they start to come into their own for sure.
Yeah.
But it's cool that you grew up here talking about this show, this podcast. It's all Alaska based. It's people that have either grown up here or were transplanted here. Everyone has their own story,
Right.
and kind of tell me about like what your experience was growing up in Alaska. I didn't grow up here, so a
Okay.
lot of things that people experience, things that are like, I guess, norms. I'm still learning those. So if you
Right.
just kind of talk about, what was the norm for you growing up where you did.
Yeah. So I grew up, um, about, well, like 12 minutes away from town. So I'm up on a mountain, and, um, so pretty rural, even though we were 15 minutes away from cars or Safeway. But we couldn't walk anywhere. We couldn't ride our bikes to a grocery store or anything like that. And so it was a lot of time playing outside. So wintertime, it sure seemed like as a kid, every year, we had dumps and dumps of snow, and we're sledding all the time, and we're making trails out in the forest and stuff. We never had like toys, as far as snow machines and things like that. But we had neighbors that had snow machines, and so maybe once a year, so I'd go ride with them, and that was always really cool. We didn't do a lot of the Alaskan type things. We didn't grow up hunting. I went fishing one time with my dad and one of my brothers. Um, some of my family has gone hunting a couple times, but like I didn't have a lot of those Alaskan experiences. We did go camping quite a bit.
Hmm.
We'd always pretty much have at least one camping trip every summer, maybe a couple. But yeah, like when I think about growing up in Alaska and what made it an Alaskan upbringing for me was was playing out in the snow constantly.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
again, like not necessarily in any big ticket ways. We weren't doing snow machines. I I, I guess I did ski as a little kid and then kind of stopped once I was like maybe 11 or 12, big enough to get hurt, I guess. But like tons of sledding, tons of playing out in the snow just all day long. And of course, tons of shoveling, right?
Yeah, I know. Comes with it, right?
Yeah.
That's funny. As a kid, even, or moving into the teenage, young adult years, were you like, get me out of here? I
Oh,
always
yeah.
wonder that when people grow up here, you have those that are like, I'm leaving, and then they either will and then come back, or you have those that are like, good riddance, and they're gone.
Right. No, it's funny, yeah, because what you're describing, like I see that I with like military folks, it's a microcosm of what it
Mm.
is to be an Alaskan, where if you meet somebody that was stationed up here, they they either love Alaska and they cannot wait to get back and they're going to retire and move back, or they freaking hate it and they will never visit ever
Yeah,
again. And like, there's no in
so true.
between. And I guess with Alaskans, you get those extremes, and then you do get some in between. People that may just never move just because they never want to, you know, put themselves out there to do it. But I was in the camp where I hated it. I could not wait to get out of Alaska. I wanted to, live in a real city, right? I mean, I lived in Anchorage, which is, the closest thing we have to like a city, right? But
Yeah.
you know, I wanted to live in a place where it's just stuff was happening. I was like, I don't even know what exactly I was looking for, but just I wanted to live in a real city.
Mm.
Definitely, we make jokes about, it takes longer for movies to get up here to the theaters. Back when people used to go to theaters, it takes
Yeah.
longer for us to get music. It takes longer for us to get, different fads in fashion and stuff. It like takes longer for us to get anything sent up here in the mail. All of that stuff. I just couldn't wait to get out of Alaska, go live, because I had no appreciation for Alaska, like
Mm.
seriously none.
Mhm.
Um, the beauty of I commute to Anchorage 4 days a week, and like the drive on the flats of looking out at Pioneer Peak,
Yeah.
coming north back to the valley, at the end of the day, and depending on what day or what time of day, maybe there's a sunset over here, or the sun's right over the top of Matanuska Peak or whatever. I mean, just gorgeous. Like, um, I didn't appreciate any of that as a kid because it was all I knew.
Yeah, exactly. You have nothing to compare it to. Did you
Yep.
ever travel, like, to the lower 48 or see other places and experience, like, what life could be like somewhere else?
Well, okay, so it's funny you say that because I did, and I'm always quick to say, like, we were blessed to travel actually a lot, even though it wasn't very sexy. Like, we
Mm.
weren't going to Disneyland and going on cruises and going to Hawaii. I went to Hawaii for the first time in my life, 3, 4 years ago.
Mm.
Um, it was to South Dakota and it was to Iowa. That's basically where we would travel because that's where my parents are from.
Mm.
Um, and so you would think that that actually would have given me an appreciation for Alaska because I have appreciation and love for those 2 states. I love my family, but those are not the most gorgeous states, especially Iowa.
Yeah.
Um, and yet, yeah, logically, I guess that should have helped me appreciate Alaska more, but I really didn't. But yeah,
Mm.
we did a lot of extended family visits to extended family, and then we did like a Washington D.C. / New England trip one year.
Oh, cool.
That was pretty awesome. We did eventually go to Disneyland. I was happy with that. I think I was like a young teenager when we did that. It's funny. We went to Florida one year. This was 2009, I think it was. We went down. My dad's a giant college football fan, so we went down there for a bowl game. And we go down to Florida, and if anybody has lived in Florida, or you're definitely familiar with like, and it was all over Facebook and stuff. They had these crazy record freezes where the invasive pythons and stuff were dying. You know,
What?
gators were.
Okay.
It was colder in Florida than it was in Alaska.
That's crazy.
It was a warm Alaskan winter, at least that period of time, and it was like, I was like 20 something degrees at night down in Florida.
Hmm.
So that I was like, come on, man! Like I finally get down to Florida, and this is what I get.
Frigid. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's funny, man. Um, well, Logan, I'm thankful we can make this happen today. If the listeners are wondering, Logan Hufford, that last name sounds familiar. It's because I started following you on Instagram after my conversation with your brother
yeah,
Chad, and just watching your Instagram and seeing some of these reels and learning more about your story. I was like, dang! I was like, this is some pretty deep, heavy stuff. This guy's got like quite a story. And what's cool about what you're doing is you had this experience, this, I don't know, previous life you could call it,
yep,
of
yeah,
struggling with addiction and sex addiction specifically, and it's a topic that's pretty heavy, pretty sensitive, might be uncomfortable for some, and those are the kind of things that really grab my attention because those things need to be talked about. Because I think when you have these little pockets of I don't know, call them what you want, whether it's, addiction or people that have mental health struggles or, like depression or anxiety, they kind of feel alone. I think that's the tendency, is to feel like they are alone in what they're going through.
yep,
And it is becoming more commonplace, less of a stigma surrounding like things like specifically like mental health disorders or conditions. I'll call them conditions,
yeah,
and there's less of a stigma around that. But other things, they still do get swept under the rug. And I think talking about things like pornography, talking about sex addiction, or even like some of the things that, I mean, I talked on this show with a police officer from Homer about, all the crazy things that are going online with predators and targeting children, and like that's the kind of stuff that I'm like, if anything, we need to just confront this elephant in the room of this
right,
stuff is happening. It's real in people's lives. People's lives are being destroyed by this kind of stuff. And rather than just pretending like it's not there, we should be talking about it.
yep,
And so that's why I thought it was really cool what you were doing, just sharing your story, sharing your own experiences, how you navigated through all that, and where you're at. And I just got that from scrolling through your Instagram, for a couple of days, and I was like, yeah, let's see if we can make this happen. And so I'm super happy you were willing. It sounds like this is not your first go around with sharing on a podcast, which is even cooler for me because I'm still learning the podcast game. You're kind of comfortable in at least being on that side of the mic and telling your story. And so I'm looking forward to this talk, for sure, man. Thanks for being willing to make it happen.
yeah. I'll just say it's been about maybe 2 years now. I can't remember the first time I went on a podcast, but and honestly, I was inspired by my brother. I was like, because I saw like, he was really intentional about it, and so I'm like, yeah, like I'm not gonna do it for the rest of my life. I don't think. I mean, I'm open to sharing my story anytime, any place, but I really intentionally wanted to like go on the blitzkrieg of like, let me just put my story out there. Really, yeah, to try to accomplish two things. Number one, I want anybody who is struggling to know, as you said, that they're not alone. It is not just you. And then number two, it's not just that you're not alone, but that there is help available.
Mhm.
I always, I use the metaphor of, if I'm trapped in a cave and it feels like there's no way out, if I find that there's other people trapped in the cave, that can help because it makes me feel that I'm not alone, right? I'm not the only one
Mm.
that's trapped, but that's a really limited ceiling if we're all still trapped in the cave. But if I
Yeah.
can meet other guys that live outside of the cave and they're like, dude, I used to live in that same cave you're in, and I know what it takes to get out. That's what I want to do with sharing my story and share what God has done and a venue like this. So thank you for having me on.
Oh, totally, man. And that's a great metaphor. I love that picture. With something like this, it it starts somewhere. I think I'm sure when you look back at your life, um, what did you see early on? Were there any signs that like I might have a problem, or am I normal? Or other people dealing with the same thing? Like,
Yeah, within that question, I basically have two different answers, which on
mm,
one hand is like I can tell you what the signs were looking back, and yet I don't think I really saw myself as. I mean, I suppose I've always seen myself as abnormal in a way. Um, and I can circle back to that, but like I didn't see myself as having a problem. I definitely didn't. I would have. I probably didn't spend too much time thinking about it at all. But if I did think about, um, I mean, whether I'm like age 10, 11, 12, 13, which is kind of that range, which is, I mean, obviously that is a range, but during those years of, what is pornography? What is me lusting? Looking at a body of a woman and sexually objectifying that image. Learning about masturbation, like all these different things that I learned during those years. I don't think I saw myself as like, oh, I do this way more than I should, or I have a real issue. What I'm about to say is not healthy, but it's probably where my mindset was, which is, well, I think probably everybody else does this, and I probably do it less than them. So yeah,
mhm,
I wouldn't have seen myself as having a problem, even though looking back, man, I can point out things that to the external eye would have seemed like no big deal, and yet I can see myself becoming a predator,
mm,
becoming somebody. And you talked about, predator in the sense of like kind of almost like the legal term, right? The
mm,
the framework of we read an article again, like back when we used to read newspapers. We read an article or we see something on Facebook or whatever of some sting, right? Law enforcement officials, catch this predator or whatever.
yeah,
To Catch a Predator, the TV show.
mhm,
Okay, so like I wasn't targeting minors. I wasn't arrested for crimes, and yet I was a predator.
mm,
I learned from an early age to chase after the attention of a girl, to crave, whatever I could get. Even as a 14, 15-year-old kid, you
mm,
know, can I get a girl to give me attention? Can I get a girl to kiss me? Can I get a girl to spend time with me? All these different things. And somebody could look at it and like, well, yeah, you're just a normal kid. You're just a normal boy, you know, and there is something normal inside of
mhm.
wanting attention of the opposite sex. There is something normal in there, but I took it to a level where I just craved it and I would do anything I could to get it. And that's what became abnormal, right? That's what became very problematic.
I see. With a lot of things in the addiction realm, you have escalating behaviors, right? So I think of an example of someone, doing a drug for the first time, and then maybe they don't do it again. Maybe for whatever reason they one and done, they experienced it and it's not a problem. And then you have someone that maybe does a drug and then they do it again and then they're like and again and now it's not necessarily giving them the same high anymore. So the behavior escalates. Maybe they start looking for other things. How did you experience that in the same kind of way?
Yeah. The short answer is yes. It was it was a very gradual escalation for many years, but it was also like a consistent upwards, upwards motion.
Hmm,
Um, I mean, I'll put it this way. So like number one, once I started doing a behavior, that was in my arsenal.
hmm,
That behavior was part of my MO. Um, I didn't start with pornography and then get to the point where I'm, spoiler alert, cheating on my wife with another woman. And
hmm,
then, okay, now I'm going to stop looking at porn.
hmm,
I'll do both.
hmm,
Uh, once I was with a prostitute for the first time, I didn't stop having affairs with other women that I knew. I added that. I mean, it was you said, Logan having lived this other life. And that's absolutely what it was. I lived a double life, and that double life escalated and escalated. And I just consistently over the course of years crossed over barriers that I thought I would never cross over.
Hmm.
I never ever thought about, or I should say, I did think about adultery and like how that shredded apart families, because I experienced some of that with various relatives, grandparents. Like I saw what it did to family reunions, people that would never talk to their siblings because of other people's affairs and how they responded to it and stuff. I remember thinking as a kid, like probably as a young teenage boy, like I would never do that. That's like the worst thing you can do to another person. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I think it is about maybe the worst thing you can do to a person. And yet I did it, and I did it many times. I never ever thought that I would, be with a prostitute, and yet I did that. Just a series of things. And yet, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but one of the blessings of being in recovery is getting to meet people who we both have a sexual addiction. We both actively working on that, and we both have experienced a lot of victory in that. And yet there's other guys that have been huge pillars in my recovery who have never gone beyond pornography in
Hmm.
terms of their version of infidelity. And they can tell you what kind of pain that caused their wife consistently looking at pornography. They can tell you the destruction that it caused in themselves. Um, and that's the beautiful and dark truth of addiction is, infidelity is infidelity. And I can cause even more collateral damage the further I take it. But anything where I'm setting aside my wife to choose something else causes damage. The beautiful part about it is, though, that guy who maybe never did a lot of the things I did can still speak into my life, because at the core of it, we have the same addiction, even though it manifested differently.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point to make because I mean, the pornography thing is, I don't want to speak for every man, but I mean, like growing up in like I call it being the elder millennial. Like you kind of grew up at kind of the top end of the internet, and as
Right.
you kind of evolved with it,
Right.
and that was one of those things. It was like, yeah, the whole pornography thing wasn't just a magazine in dad's closet anymore. It was accessible everywhere, and
Yeah.
so I got exposed to it. I remember in middle school for the first time, and it was something that was seemed to be commonplace around my circle of friends, and even moving into adulthood, like, it was something that you, knew that was going on, and now you may bring up an interesting point about there's some people that deal with that area and it never leaves there. And then, like you're saying, in your experience, you kind of not only dealt with that struggle, but then it kind of spiraled into this larger thing. The tendency is to minimize it, that it's normal, that it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you bring up in light of your relationships, how that takes away from those. I think some people would point out the moral, like it's just a moral thing, like, oh, well, it's just because, you believe in God or it crosses some moral, value
Right.
that you have. But I think if you looked at it just from a bare bones of, okay, if I'm in a relationship with someone I love, or let's say, um, I don't know, if it's affecting my relationships with people, I mean, does the higher power really matter if it's still affecting the relationships on the ground level? Like, I mean, I feel like there's an argument there for sure.
Yeah. I mean, this is like, quite honestly, we could spend an hour just talking about this topic. And I think it'd be well worth it of like, is it wrong? Is it a bad idea? Is it destructive? You could insert whatever words, right? But like,
Mm,
is it destructive to view pornography if you're not a Christian, or if you're not married, or if you're
mm,
not in a committed relationship, and all these different things? And there are things that I would say, like, I'm a Christian, and I believe that I'm saved because Jesus Christ died for my sins, and I trust in Jesus for my salvation. And so, yes, if I'm talking to a group at church and we have, the same core beliefs, I am going to address certain things based on what we all believe in
mm,
scripture, in the Bible. But if I'm talking to a group of atheists, I am not going to hold back from my very strong belief that is rooted in science that pornography is incredibly destructive.
Mm,
It's not destructive because God says it's a sin. It's not
mm,
destructive because it's cheating. It's not destructive because, it hurts my wife. All of those things are true. It's destructive because I am training my brain. I am training my limbic system. I'm training my body to chase after what I want when I want it. And when I
mm.
want something new, I will take something new. And when I want something different, I will take something different. And I'm not going to stop until I want to stop. So it teaches me these awful power and control ideals. It creates this like X-rated version of Pavlov's dog, and I'm the dog.
Oh, yeah.
Um, it's terrible. And yes, if I am in a committed relationship, it causes horrible destruction to my partner. But that's icing on the cake in a really
Mm,
bad way. Like,
yeah,
that's not what makes it wrong. It's
sure.
wrong because it's destructive to me and my body and yeah, like my mind and my soul. But yeah, it doesn't matter if you and I, the audience has different spiritual beliefs. It does matter, but it doesn't make it like, oh, it's only wrong because of I believe in the Bible or because I'm a Christian.
Yeah, no, that is a great way to put it, Logan. Because from what I was just saying, I was just looking at the relationships that it affects, and you bring it
Yeah.
to a much, much deeper and more relevant point is that it's destructive to the individual, to you as the person, and then yes, the fruit of that is ruining relationships and all the other fallout that could potentially lead to. That's a really great point. Did you in the beginning like you mentioned feeling like you were living a double life, and people that are living a double life, their worst fear is getting found out. Um, how long were you successfully able to kind of hide these things, or did you hide them, or did people know that you had some struggles? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah. This is gonna be a kind of a complex answer because there were times where things were found out. There were lots of times where I would confess to my wife, where where I shared with other people because I would feel so bad that I would, like, vomit it out. Um so yeah, there wasn't like a there are people where it's kind of it's the cinematic version of like there's this whole double life, there's a second family and a second house and all these different things, and then like one day it all comes crashing down. It wasn't like that for me. It was much more piecemeal. There were certain elements that I tried to keep hidden. There were certain elements that I did keep hidden. There were certain elements that were known. So uh, when I was dating my wife, I told her we talked about pornography, and I told her that I struggled, that I don't remember the exact words, but I told her, yeah, I that I struggle with it. Sometimes I've looked at it, and I don't want to, but I do struggle with that. And to that point, in my head, I thought that was the truth, because like I had not physically cheated with somebody else, but mostly it was because fear on my end, and then also like I didn't have a long history of committed relationships. I did a lot of playing around, and
Mm,
so I didn't really have a lot of opportunities, honestly, to cheat on somebody. Um, but yeah, so I told her like, yeah, I struggle with pornography. And that's all I said, and I thought that I was giving her a true answer. But then as we're dating and I actually had some victory from pornography, looking back on it, that's because I was focusing my lust, focusing my objectification onto her.
mm,
So now I'm, like, obsessed with Carrie and obsessed with I'm so attracted to her and I want her, and so that's a whole other thing. Um, Before we got married, I physically cheated on her multiple times, though.
mm.
And once I broke that barrier, it was like, that old fable of like the boy plugging his hole in the dam, in the water. Once that was out, once the water started coming through, it just broke everything apart in terms of
Mm.
my behavior. Once I justified doing that, I just kept doing it. And then, then it was with prostitutes as well, and it was the whole thing. Um, 6 months after we got married was the first time that I confessed to Carrie physical sexual infidelity.
Hmm.
I wrote her a letter, and if you're listening, like, please, I am telling you my story. None of this is meant to be directions on what you should do, including parts that might kind of seem like they were good ideas. What I did was not a healthy thing because I just wrote from my gut,
Hmm.
and I didn't seek healthy feedback from healthy people. I just felt really bad and I wanted to feel better. And in my head, I was like, I'm never going to do this again. I'm done with this. Well, That's that's literally like somebody who's been, a hopeless alcoholic for years and just going, I'm not gonna change anything in my life. I'm just gonna decide to not be an alcoholic anymore. And that it does not usually work. It
Yeah.
can, some people can stop drinking just drop of a hat. You almost never can. You usually need to wildly change your infrastructure. And that same for me. So I wrote her a letter and I don't remember how detailed I got, but my purpose was to truly put it out there and say, "Hey, I've had affairs. I've cheated on you. I've done these things." Um, but so like she wasn't prepared for that. I mean, not that anybody can be prepared for that, but um, I was only thinking about myself. I wanted to feel better. It was like somebody going to confession. I
Hmm.
just wanted to get this off my chest. And so that in of itself was really hard for her. Looking back on it, that became a part of a different abuse cycle though, because then I would confess. Every time I'd have another physical affair, I'd confess to her again.
Hmm.
So I'm not changing my behavior. I'm not changing my infrastructure. I'm just, I keep on doing the same thing, except I'm vomiting to her every time I do it. I'm so sorry I had another affair. I'm so sorry I had another affair. And I'm just beating her up every time emotionally, and she's just like taking blow after blow. So it was absolutely awful. Um, and so, to your question, it's like, yeah, there was a lot that wasn't hidden because I had this terribly unhealthy cycle of how I was living where one of the things we do in recovery is we go through this, about once or twice a year, we do a refresher course as a group of the relapse cycle, which is literally all the way from I get triggered, I get stressed, I get, something interferes with my life. And then I get to the point where I act out in my addiction. And this could be anger, this could be alcohol, this could be drugs, this could be sexual addiction. I act out and then I feel really, really awful. And I'm like, I'm never going to do that again. But then I get stressed again and then I go back to it. And there's a lot more stages than what I just shared, but that's like the 30,000-foot view. And
Hmm.
that's what my life was. It was a giant relapse cycle.
Hmm.
And sometimes I would go through that entire relapse cycle within a day. And then sometimes maybe I would take 5 months to go through it, before the next time I would have another physical affair. But at no point was I like living in a healthy, holistic, authentic way.
Hmm.
Sometimes I was able to like white knuckle it for a little bit longer.
Yeah. Wow, man. So within the first 6 months of marriage, you had had multiple. I mean, I guess
What I started before we got married.
started
I
before you got
started
married,
having affairs before, and then that carried through.
and then so how long did this cycle go? Like, one of my thoughts is for your wife to be like still like in it with you at 6 months in after 6 months of being newlyweds. Here's everything that's happened. The kind of the confession comes out. I'm sure it felt like she was like hit by a truck,
Yep.
and then how long of these repetitive affairs, even after that and her response to that, like how long did that go on?
I mean, her response was a little bit different depending on the time.
Mhm.
I remember, you know, I can picture her sitting on our bed and she's crying. I can
Mhm.
picture um one specific moment where she's laying on the bathroom floor like screaming, like literally crying out to God, screaming, going, "Why?"
Mhm.
And I can also picture her I don't know that she didn't cry, but I remember I at least have a memory of a visual of her hearing this and not showing a lot of emotion, because this was
Mm,
years in. This was several years in, and
mm,
she had and this what I'm saying is she would tell you that, when she shares her testimony, this comes out of her mouth, so I'm not speculating. By this point, not to say that didn't hurt terribly, but she had started to become a little bit frozen, a little bit numb, which is an awful thing, and that's not something that
yeah,
you want, right? But it's absolutely. I mean, this might ruffle some feathers, um, but it's very similar. I would say it's not dissimilar from somebody who, if you're a child growing up in an abusive home, at some point hearing mom and dad scream at each other and throw pots and pans and hit each other is not going to carry the same effect, right?
yeah. No,
And that's what it was with Carrie, where it still hurt terribly, but she started to build up some scar tissue.
mm,
And I mean, it is, I know I'm jumping ahead, but like, I mean, it's truly a miracle that, um, that we are able to have the life that we have today. And I say that I do believe it is a miracle. It is by God's grace. She has also put in tremendous work in her own recovery. I put in tremendous work in my recovery. So it's not as if we just decided, hey, I'm going to stop cheating on you, and you need to start trusting me and we're going to be happy. It's like, not by a long shot. It
mm,
was a grueling process on my end to get sober and to build trust. It was a whole other process on her end. But yeah, I should not be able to go home after this podcast and, give Carrie a kiss hello and give her a hug and see my boys. Um, I every day I'm reminded, and every day when at bedtime with my boys, I thank God for salvation. I thank God for recovery, because on my worst day, on the hardest day, when there's hurricane force winds and I'm sick and my kids are sick and all this stuff, I'm like, man, I got it really, really freaking good.
yeah. That's crazy, man. And the story, this kind of story, I feel like I have heard variations of before, but it usually results with the woman or the other, like the cheating party, walking out the door, and doing so in a justified kind of way.
Yeah.
What do you? I mean, you probably know just from Carrie sharing this, but I'm sure she had a lot of people saying, "What were you thinking? What? Why? What was the point of staying with Logan?" What does she say to that? Like, what is her response, to those type of questions during that time?
Yeah.
Or
So
time?
again, like, little disclaimer, this story is true and it is descriptive. It is not prescriptive of what you
Mm,
should do.
gotcha. Yeah.
When we talk about recovery, here in a bit, we'll talk about recovery. We'll talk about what that looked like. And absolutely, there's going to be stuff in that is prescriptive, that, if
Mm,
you're struggling, if you need, like, yeah, you should start applying these things.
mm,
But this part of the story is just descriptive.
gotcha.
So yeah, and again, this is all stuff that she will gladly share in her own testimony. So I'm not speculating on any of this, because that's one thing I'm not going to do, is guess, what she was thinking or guess why she did something. Carrie felt very much trapped in this feeling of, like, she wants to be the best wife. She wants to be a good supportive wife. So she didn't want to, she felt obligation, to stay with me. She felt obligation to try to keep the family together. Codependency is usually a huge thing where there's an addict in the house, right? And so if there's a partner, I mean, it doesn't have to be a partner. It could be a kid or a friend, but, somebody that is trying to hold it all together, but they go to such great lengths that they actually shouldn't. And that's the codependency piece. And so she definitely
Mm,
struggled with that for sure. Um, she also, she's been an incredible wife, coming up on 15 years now. And but part of that was she didn't want to bring shame on the family name. She didn't want to bring shame on me, which is like, I've heard her say that, and even me hearing her, sometimes I'm like, but that's crazy. Like, I was awful.
mm,
Like, screw me. I don't deserve for you to think about that. That goes to
Mm,
show where her heart was, right?
totally.
And that, I mean, that's truly where her heart was, though. She wanted to honor her husband and she wanted to honor her family. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know how to respond. To your point, she didn't have a bunch of people in her ear telling her like she should leave and she should. So there's a couple things there. Number one, she didn't feel free to. I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, I guess I'm starting to speculate a little bit. I know
Mm,
what happened and I know generally what her motivations were, but if I can't like directly quote from something she shared, I try to be really careful, saying like,
yeah,
well, here's why she did something.
sure.
But she wasn't talking to a bunch of different people about all this stuff. Again, because of where her heart was. Like she didn't want to just spread a bunch of stuff. Even though it would have been true stuff, she
Mm,
wasn't gonna tell, a bunch of her friends like, yeah, here's what I'm going through. Here's what, Logan's doing. Eventually, I think it was like 2 or 3 years into marriage. I could be off on that, but I think that's what it was. She did tell me, she was like, you need to tell your family and you need to tell the pastors at church. Like, cause we're still attending church. We're being a good couple on Sunday morning and holding hands and all this. And, um, so she made that clear. She's like, you've got to tell some other people. It can't just be me who knows. But she didn't know what it looked like for her to ask for help.
mm,
Um, and it wasn't until a couple years after that, in 2015, I had another affair, and she told me, "All right, I, I can't do this. Either you get serious help, you make serious changes, or I'm gone and the kids are gone." And I knew Carrie well enough that she doesn't speak, generally speaking, she doesn't just talk from a place of emotion. If she says something, she really means it.
mm,
And so I didn't know what that would look like, but I believed her and I didn't want to lose my wife and I didn't want to lose my kids. And so that ultimatum was gigantic because that was not something that like she was not engaging in recovery coaching at that time. She hadn't gone to therapy. She hadn't gone to a recovery group, nothing. Um, so that was on its own. I think that was a miracle for her to know to give me an ultimatum. Cause like that is one of the very first things, not that everybody should do, everyone's in a different spot, but that's one of the very first things that she'll talk to a woman about. If need be, here's what it looks like to give an ultimatum. If you are in a spot, where you
mm,
have a husband who is abusing you, who is not making changes, who is, making you there's unrepentantly living this life, here's what you may have to do. And it was huge though, because it was her pain, my pain, like the pain of being an addict and hurting my family. I had just like accepted it.
mm,
It wasn't until I was faced with the reality of like, dude, you're about to lose your wife, you're about to lose your kids, that got me to start putting on my big boy pants and actually seek help.
mm. Did your family or anyone else get brought into the loop at that point after the ultimatum? Like, is that when you started like, okay, maybe I do need to go to recovery. Maybe I do need to let, my family or my church know what's been going on and that I need help. Is that when that door started to open?
So the door of family and church, that actually did happen whenever she told, again, I don't remember the year, but so 2 or 3 years after we got married, that would have been, so like let's say it was 2013 maybe.
Okay.
Um Whenever she said that, I did follow through with that. I told my pastors and I told all of my immediate family. So my siblings, and then, only one sibling was married at the time. So my siblings, sister-in-law, and my parents. And I shared that with them. I shared it with two of the pastors at my church. I started meeting with one of my pastors regularly, specifically for this. So like I shouldn't paint the picture. Sometimes I fall into this trap of like very black and white thinking where it's like, until 2016, I was bad Logan, and all I did was evil. And then after I got into recovery, now I'm healthy. And it's like, that's not true. That's not what it was.
Mhm.
Number one, in 2016, I didn't hit a toggle switch and start becoming healthy all the time. I, you
Yeah.
know, I, I still can struggle with the best of them, and I can be selfish with the best of them, and all this. But yeah, there've been a lot of progressive victory over the last 9.5 years. And
Mhm.
then in that first several years of our relationship, yeah, there was a lot of evil. There was a lot of darkness. I desired deeply to love my wife, and I desired deeply to love my family. I did not have a freaking clue s how to stop acting out. I did not.
Yeah.
I felt like once I would get triggered, I would if I wasn't basically lucky, that's how I would have thought about it. If I wasn't lucky, I just got myself on this super highway of limbic system. Not that I didn't know that term, but this limbic system, and I'm just like on autopilot, and I'm giving into temptations, and the next thing I know, I'm with somebody, or I'm texting somebody, or I'm on some website or whatever. Um, and all of that is BS. It wasn't autopilot. Logan was making decisions, right? I was making choices. It felt as if it was just automatic. And so I know I'm on a tangent there, but like to circle back, I did do some things. I did, reach out to certain folks and share. And meeting with my pastor, like, yeah, that was better than nothing. But to his credit, and I've told him this, like, I'm so grateful for this. He made it clear after, I don't remember if it was several months, I think. I don't think it was a year, that we had been meeting every couple weeks for like an hour or two. But he told me, he said, Logan, I do not know how to help you with this. He's like, I can support you and love you, and I can walk you through scripture. I can be helpful to you, but I don't know this area. I don't understand this level of sexual sin, sexual depravity, which I give him props for, because there's a lot of pastors that would be like, all right, like, this is one of my flock. I have to be the one to help
Mhm.
him, and I got to be the only one. And he didn't do that. He recognized he was not equipped to deal with this issue. And so as soon as I found somebody that was qualified to be a mentor, and we can get to that, but that was Rick. He was my mentor in sexual addiction program. My pastor was like very, not that he was hands off, but he was very supportive of, hey, this dude, he knows what he's talking about. Work with this dude.
Yeah,
Um,
that's big. 'Cause
yeah,
I think you're right. You could have the pastor over spiritualize it and just be like, "Look, dude, like, you're the problem, like, you gotta, I think I told you in the lead up to this, like, you just gotta give it to God or some other blanket, kinda Christianese saying to where you're like, "Well, I know that, but it's not working. Like, what do I
yeah,
do?" And could have passed the blame on you, or just being like, "Well, dude, obviously you got sin in your life you gotta deal with."
yeah.
Pretty wise, of him to want stick with you and then realize at what point, maybe there was a different route that you needed to take. So that, yeah, that is really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I mentioned this earlier, but I'm a Christian, and I'm sitting inside Creekside Church, which has been my home church now for almost a decade. And like, I love pastors that shepherd their flock, and that are biblically counseling their people. I think that absolutely is something that all of us, if I'm a Christian, I need to be in the scripture. I need to be doing that. But yeah, it is a common thing that if somebody is going to a pastor, or maybe it's a Christian friend, or even a Christian therapist, um, there can be, I want to be really careful. The word that I want to say is or the term that kind of comes to mind is like an over reliance on scripture. And I don't know, I'm like, maybe that's not the right way to put it, because I hold the Bible very high up, in terms of like, if I'm not sure what to do, I need to go there. But there are things that I need to loop in as well. Like, yes, I need to spend time in the word, and I need to spend time in prayer, but I also need to invite other human beings,
Mm,
into my life. And I've said this to pastors, to Christian men, like, if you don't think that somebody in addiction might need something beyond a Bible study, beyond meeting with their pastor. Like we can seriously look in the Bible and see examples of times where like God called men or people to seek out other people to help them, to support them. Like we need that. We need to be able to go to people who have been down a similar path who can help us. It
Mm,
doesn't throw out the Bible, but it's like I need to work with people who have experienced something like what I struggle with and who know the pathway out of that cave.
mm. That's a great point. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think just through stories. Like, are you thinking like New Testament stories, Old Testament? Um, I think one, the guidance was for believers to be in the practice of coming together anyways. That's kind of been a
Right.
theme throughout biblical history, is that we have these beliefs, but then we're supposed to be hanging out with one another. And, the common phrase is doing life together
Right.
is the common phrase. But and that, I think that's why is that's the other, I think that's a big piece. That's a big piece of it. As far as recovery goes, so, you're in this kind of chaos, this whole situation's kind of coming to a head with everything, and now more people are getting brought into the loop. That first step towards recovery, I think, is probably a big one for people that know they know they have a problem. They know they're not where they want to be. What does that first step look like? Is it the same for everyone? Is it depend on the person or the situation or whatever the vice is? Like, what is your advice to that person to be like, I have a problem. I need to take that first step to getting out. What is that?
Yeah. It's largely going to be different for different people. Especially based on like things like geography. If somebody's listening to this and they're up in Fairbanks, I don't know what's available
Mhm.
to them. Like I'm sure there are groups that would be helpful, but I don't know what those groups are in Fairbanks. And I doubt there's a sexual addiction specific group. There might be. I don't know of one. Um, a lot of the times, in fact, you're the first podcast I've been on that's Alaska based, right? So like most of the time when this question gets brought up, it's like, well, I don't know if you're listening in Tampa, if you're listening in Mexico, if you're listening in England, like I don't know what's available to you, but it's about teaching people how to fish, right? And those principles are going to be, pretty much the same for anyone, which is I need to be real with what my issues are. And so that looks like there's honestly, so there's a like a little questionnaire, a little quiz on the Prodigals of Alaska website that you can go to. I'm not joking. This sounds like this sounds like it's a joke. If you Google like test for am I a sex addict, there's literally like dozens of tests that you can take, and some of them are more in depth than others. Maybe I should have just one picked out, I guess, if I'm going to say, then go to the Prodigals of Alaska website. But, and there is one on there. But if you take that test, that's going to be a pretty revealing thing to look at of, is this something that I struggle with? And yeah, I need to not put it on the back burner. Or is this something like, no, 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 I'm a sex addict. I have raging issues and I need to do whatever I have to do to get this under control. So to paraphrase that, I need to be very real with like what my struggles are, what my issues are. And I think that titles and labels can be overemphasized. I think they can be maybe even misleading sometimes, but I also think that there's a lot of power in a label.
Hmm,
And one thing that I didn't realize for a lot of my life is labels don't have to be forever.
hmm,
So and again, like I get pushback sometimes from Christians. They're like, oh, don't say that you're an alcoholic, because then you're saying that you're always going to be that for the rest of your life. Or don't say that you're a sex addict, because then that says that you're a sex addict instead of you're a Christian. It's like, no, it says this is something that has me in bondage. And yeah, if I don't make changes, then I will stay in bondage for the rest of my life, and I will probably hurt more and more people as I go. So in that sense, a label is a very good thing, because it
Mm,
identifies where I'm at and what I need to work on. But that label doesn't have to be with me forever. That's why my Instagram handle is no longer in bondage. It doesn't say I will never struggle with sexual temptation or I couldn't act out. No, not at all. I absolutely could. And I do get tempted. I do feel triggers, but I'm not in bondage to it anymore. Um, so sorry, I'm like I'm going off on these tangents, but number one,
yeah,
identify where you're at. And there's a really good chance that, yeah, a quiz, a test could be just a small piece of that puzzle. Um, that leads to what your second step, and really it's like a 1A, 1B thing, which is it needs to be with a healthy person who's ready to hear it, but share your story.
mm,
If you grapple with this, if you feel like you might be in bondage to this, or you are in bondage to this, which by the way, if somebody's wondering, and this applies to any addiction, any struggle, but for the purposes of right now, we'll just talk about sexual addiction. If I'm not quite sure whether or not this is an addiction versus just like an annoyance, I mean, I'll just ask this of any guy I talk to, like, okay, do I keep hurting people because I keep doing the wrong thing, even though I know I shouldn't be doing that wrong thing?
mm,
Like, I don't need to
yeah,
make it more complicated. If I keep doing the wrong thing, even though I know it's wrong, and by doing the wrong thing, I keep hurting people,
yeah.
there's a really good chance I'm an addict.
That's a good way to put it.
And so, but that one, so 1A, identify what your issue is. 1B, talk about it. Now the 1B, that's where it depends totally on like where you're at, right? Geographically, what's your infrastructure, who's in your life already. You might have a really healthy person that you can go to and sit down over a cup of coffee, and that might be a good person for you to open up to. It is not a good idea to just find anybody that will listen and be like, I have all these problems. So funny enough, I mean, maybe it's funny, not funny. Yesterday, as we were having technical difficulties and weren't able to have this interview, I was talking with one of the church staff. This is a lady, and she was sharing how, because they've had issues with like people coming on off hours trying to get in the building. And I was like, man, does that stuff happen a lot? And she was sharing how she's like, well, sometimes what happens is people will call and they'll share like their sin struggles and like really inappropriate ways. So like, yes,
Mm,
don't be that person. Don't just call up a random church or just ask a random person at a coffee shop, or if you've got a buddy who you guys have been frequently doing the same wrong things together, that's probably not the person that you open up to. But if you have a healthy person that you can open up to, and if you don't, which a lot of people are not going to have a healthy enough person that should be like their person to share that vulnerability, that's where a recovery group comes in.
mm,
Um, And, prodigals, we've got a couple groups here in Alaska. So we're not super widespread. Um, this is definitely the best recovery group I know about, but it's not the only one. Celebrate Recovery is it's a Christ-centered recovery group. It's fairly general. There's no specific addiction. It's, not, it doesn't go to the level of depth that like a prodigals does, but that's an option. I've even told people, hey, if all you have in your city is an AA group, Alcoholics Anonymous, go to that group. Maybe you don't ever go back there. Maybe you do, but
mhm,
that's a group that is a pre-existing infrastructure for someone to come and share their story. So, if that's all you have, I would take advantage of that. And then of course, you know, a really, really good option is a qualified sexual addiction therapist, which like 10, 11 years ago, I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know that there were therapists trained in sexual addiction.
mm,
Um, And then conversely, there are therapists trained in betrayal trauma, so that
Interesting.
somebody like my wife, which like most people don't even know that term. My wife, for her to be able to go to somebody who has been trained in this, who understands what it is to be battered and lied to and deceived and trampled over and all these things, not to mention, their bed has been shared with countless other people. Um, a betrayed spouse needs resources, and they need more than just books. They need more than just a video series, although that stuff might be really good. And so I know that was a long list, but that's, to kind of give just a little slice of like, I don't know exactly what's going to be best for you, but some someone who is willing to let you be vulnerable and then sit in that and hear that, is going to be really, really key. But then you need to stick with, and I'll pause here, but I mean, you need to stick with something, and you need accountability. And that's something that gets really misunderstood, I think.
Yeah, I think no, I think you did a good job of kind of laying out a couple different layers and options that someone could take if they, realize that they might have these destructive behaviors and where to begin those first steps to take it at a variety of different levels and options. Now, I think that's great. So someone decides to take the first step towards recovery, whatever that is, whether it's personal relationship or actually going to like a 12-step meeting, AA or something like that. I think that there's probably some expectations built in their minds for what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
Who's going to be there? What kind of information is going to be shared? Is it going to be um, scary or uncomfortable? What's it like when you actually just get beyond the what it could be and then you show up to your first meeting? What's the reality of that look like or what it was for you?
Yeah. So, like so many of my answers, I cannot help but answer in multiple parts because, once again, this is something where I experienced different versions of this. Um, I distinctly remember the very first time I ever went to a recovery group, which was a year before, almost a full year before I went to my first prodigals group. So,
Mm.
and those were very different experiences. So, like, the first group I ever went to was Sex Addicts Anonymous, which is it, if you're familiar at all with AA, even if somebody's only familiar from like movies and stuff, right? But if you're familiar with AA, hi, I'm Bob and I'm an alcoholic. It's the same thing. Hi, I'm Bob, I'm Logan, I'm a sex addict. Um, but like, so my wife, she drove me. We were in the valley. She drove me into Anchorage, where this group was, and in the minivan, my wife, 4 kids, and she was going to go take the kids and go play at a park for a little bit. And I was going to go to the meeting. So like I'm walking across the parking lot, and it felt like I was walking for like 15 minutes, cause it was just like this it's probably 30 seconds. Right. But it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Like, what am I going to find? And I remember walking up to the church. And it was very much a stereotypical kind of like into the church, this old wooden church. And, you go down in the basement where it's like, that old wood that you can smell. If you've ever been in a church basement, right, you can smell it. That kind of musty smell. But I'm like, as I'm walking, just to give you a little glimpse of like how, I mean, obviously I was unhealthy because I was still struggling with addiction, very much so struggling, but how selfish and how much I lacked awareness. One of the things I was thinking about was like, oh man, is there gonna be like a bunch of like greasy old weird dudes down there? Even trapped in my addiction, I still was focused on like other people and their problems, right?
Mm.
Because here's the thing, if that was the case, well, I probably belonged with those guys, right? And the reality was it wasn't quite so extreme. I think it was all guys that were quite a bit older than me. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, the youngest guy was probably in his 50s. But it was only a handful of guys. Um, and yeah, kind of older, middle aged, and then like one guy that was quite a bit older. And they were at a variety of stages, in sobriety and in recovery. And I went to that group for 4 months. Um, and there was some traction that I gained for a bit, but really it was a very low ceiling, and there was not really any recovery that I did. It was mostly I didn't act out for 4 months. It was a lack of action, unhealthy action in that way, but I wasn't working on stuff. I wasn't
Mhm.
processing through stuff. And a lot of that's on me. Most of that is on me. I will say it was it was tough because there wasn't a lot of I didn't when I was in that room, I didn't look around and go, "Man, there's a bunch of dudes here where they have the type of life I want."
Mm.
And that's kind of a sad thing. Going back to what I said earlier about finding a group, finding a resource, and this isn't necessarily for like if you're opening up for the first time, but when you're looking to attach yourself, embed yourself into an infrastructure like a recovery group, I think very strongly you need to be able to look around that room and go, yeah, there's some people here who have the type of life that I want to have one day.
Mm.
Because you need to be able to have hope that I keep using that metaphor that there's life outside the cave and there's thriving life, right?
Yeah.
If it's just a bunch of guys that are all kind of still in that, maybe they're kind of getting out of the cave a little bit, but they don't really know how to live life outside of the cave. We're all just kind of peers. We're all kind of still in the same spot. That can be tricky. Um, and I try to have grace. Like every group is going to be, every group has to have a start. And so, if that's just where they're at in their life cycle, okay, like maybe, give it some time, still try to work with those people. But that's what that group was. It was limited, but it gave me my first taste of I can sit in a room and share how much I struggle and nothing happened.
Mm.
Nobody looked at me and made fun of me. Nobody kicked me out. Nobody was like, dude, you're a weirdo. They listened, and they appreciated that I was willing to be honest. And that was good for me to recognize, like, I can just share this. Now, to be fair, I'd already started to do a little bit of that with family, with pastors. So it wasn't the first time that I got to experience the grace of somebody listening, right? And going, hey, thank you for sharing that. Um, I went to another group that was similar. I went to a Celebrate Recovery group a few months later, but neither of those groups were the thing that I needed. It was, in fact, at a Celebrate Recovery group, which is kind of like a Christian version of AA.
Mhm.
I met a guy named Rick, and so like the guys and the gals split off, and I was with the guys group, and so maybe there was like 20 of us, and everybody had a substance addiction except for me and Rick, and he and I both said, I'm so and so, and I'm here for sexual addiction. I didn't know it. He had like 10, 15 years of sobriety at that time. Um, and so that caught my ear, like, oh, okay, this dude has a sexual addiction. Interesting. Oh, that's cool that he's here. And he pulled me aside, and it wasn't the first time, I don't think, but I think it was pretty early on. He was like, hey, I appreciate you being here. You need more than this group. He's like, I needed more than this group. And then
Hmm.
he introduced a little bit more about his story, and he talked about a group called Prodigals, which was in Anchorage. And at that time, there was only one meeting. It was in Anchorage. And he's like, Prodigals was the hardest thing I ever did. It was like boot camp, but it's what I needed to change my life. And based on your story, Logan, you probably need something like that. And so
Right.
he invited me to come with him, and I pushed him off for a while. After I think it was several months, I finally went just to like make him happy. I went one time with him, and that was the first time that I got to experience there's many men that are living outside of the cave, and there's many men that are thriving. There's many men who have restored and transformed marriages. There are spouses who are living transformed lives, spouses who have been hurt just as bad as I've hurt my wife, and yet they're not frozen in time, numb, just hateful, vengeful. Not to say that Carrie was those things, but like most spouses that have been hurt in this way become frozen in time, and at best numb, at worst um pretty negative,
Mhm.
understandably.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yet there were spouses that had totally transformed lives, but these guys who were healthy guys, they weren't perfect, but they were real, they were authentic. um That was a total game changer. And even then, it wasn't immediate. That was March, the first time I went to a prodigals meeting, and I got sober May 19th. So, I mean, it still took several weeks of trying to do things, you know, just half-heartedly, trying to do things my way, trying to give minimal effort and then falling on my face. But prodigals was totally, totally different. I can explain a little bit of what made it different, but it was a completely different experience than any other recovery group.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's my next question. What was the secret sauce at at Prodigals? I mean, you'd experienced a couple other groups beforehand. You know, already talked to pastors. Family was in the loop, and you were still kind of struggling to gain traction in this. What was it about Prodigals that did it for you?
Yeah, pretty simply, I mean, yes, prodigals is Christ-centered, but that wasn't the thing because Celebrate Recovery is Christ-centered.
Sure.
Prodigals has is it the infrastructure allows for and actually encourages guys to get feedback from other guys. Um, if you've ever been to a 12-step group that's AA or modeled after AA, when you're sharing, number one, if I'm sharing in an AA group, I can share whatever I want. I can share how my day has been. I can share how my week has been. I can share my life story. I can share something that was encouraging in my Bible reading today, or something I read out of the AA book. I can share whatever I want. That's not bad, but I would argue especially if I'm struggling, if I'm trying to find out which way is up, I need some parameters.
Hmm.
Um, but then the second thing is when I'm done sharing at almost any other recovery group and Manny's sitting across the table from me and Manny is hearing Logan maybe straight up lie, maybe say things that are wildly unhealthy, maybe say things that are totally just I'm not taking any ownership over my crap, right? I'm
Hmm.
blaming everything on my wife, everything on, the outside world or my boss or whatever. And you're not allowed to call me out on any of that. You're not
Hmm.
allowed to ask me questions. You're not allowed to be like, "Logan, just curious, have you tried doing things this way instead of that way?" Or, "Logan, what's it looked like in the past when you've done things this way? What's that looked like for you?" And it's one thing to like, "Hey, in this group, we're not gonna let people give advice." I can kinda understand that, but to not allow questions, to not allow follow-up questions and, for people to just call out BS, call out red flags, it's very, very hard for true transformation to take place. Because I'm an addict. I'm going to lie with the best of them. I'm really good at tricking people. I'm really good at deceiving people. I'm really good at manipulating the crowd, and finding out what makes you tick versus what makes you tick, and then feeding you what you need and feeding you what you need. And that's exactly what I would do every day as an addict. I did not need a safe space. Well, let me back up. I needed a safe space, but what a lot of groups become is they become a comfortable space. And that's
Hmm.
very different.
Yeah.
And so prodigals, it is safe in the sense that there's anonymity, right? What's said here stays here. You know, um, Guys are all here because they have a shared struggle and all that stuff. But it is not a comfortable space, man. It's
Yeah.
not comfortable. I've had guys, get in my face and be like, not in a mean way, not in an unhealthy way, but I've had guys that have hurt my feelings, that have been like, man, you better cut that out. You better stop doing that. But most of the time, though, it's not even that. Most of the time, it's when it does hurt, it's because they're asking hard questions in the right areas.
Hmm.
And I don't like that. It's uncomfortable for me.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. It's it's cool to hear that that exists, that there, because it seems like a lot of recovery, at least for, I've never been to a recovery program before. My dad growing up, I remember he had an alcohol problem. He would go to AA groups, so I'm familiar with
Yeah.
that. I've heard of the 12-step programs before, but they do all kind of seem to have the same rules, I guess, or at least similar, like, um, format.
Yep.
And it's interesting. I didn't know that you couldn't offer, someone can just say whatever they want to and no one's allowed to, like, say anything or clarify anything or ask any questions,
Right.
I can see the value of why you found some more help at this other one, at
Yeah.
Prodigals, because people are able to kind of give you feedback. And then it sounds like, and I don't know if you said this, but it sounds like at this group, you saw people down the road that you said, I want to be there where they're
Yes.
at. Like, obviously, I want to find whatever they found.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
Rick was, definitely like front and center, and he was the guy that I met at Celebrate Recovery. But even then, I don't remember if I necessarily thought this to myself, but it certainly could have been easy for me to be like, okay, well, Rick's one guy, but maybe he's just an anomaly,
mm,
right? Like maybe
yeah.
maybe he just had some miracle. But so then to be like, okay, it's not just Rick, it's this guy and it's that guy and it's these other 6 guys, I mean, over the course of time, I mean, I've met I mean, it's 15, 20 guys that have graduated from the program, which is like a 2-year voluntary house arrest program.
Mm,
They've graduated from the program that are they're not perfect, right? These are not guys that just became perfect guys, but they live life in a healthy, authentic way. They're no longer in bondage,
mhm.
to sexual addiction. And yeah, I didn't think that was possible.
Wow. When you say like 2-year house arrest program, do you literally mean like your ankle monitor, someone's going to know where you're at all the time? Or like, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Like the
Yeah.
actual length of
Yeah.
time? You mentioned boot camp, and I was thinking like maybe a couple weeks, but you're saying this is like a 2-year commitment to this
Right.
thing. Okay.
Yeah. And so, and these are metaphors. And of course I'm kind of mixing metaphors, house arrest, boot camp, but, so it wasn't literal house arrest and
Okay.
it was not part of the legal system. Um, but like literally my mentor, when I would go to work, I had to take a selfie and send it to him. When I would go to lunch, I would take a selfie in front of wherever I'm grabbing lunch and I would send it to him. Um, if I wanted to go on a camping trip, so we live in Alaska, right? What do we want to do? We want to go camping.
Yeah.
And so if we wanted to go on a camping trip, I needed to get permission, number one. And then number two, if I have permission, I have to write up a safety plan, which is a multiple page document detailing where are we going, who are we going with, what are we looking to do on this camping trip, what am I going to be doing to be safe. When I'm in the program, I have to make a phone call every single day, no exceptions. So everyone listening knows there's a lot of places where I'm camping where I can't make a phone call. So
Mhm.
am I willing to drive 30 minutes, an hour, 90 minutes to go make a phone call? Because if I'm not, I don't get to go on the camping trip. I got to make, and so, in the sense of boot camp, it's like, and I never served in the military, but, we use that term because it's for the time that I'm in the program, I lose my autonomy.
Mm,
I no longer call the shots. I don't get to do things based on me thinking that they seem like a good idea. I do things based on whether or not I'm allowed to. And there's absolutely there's a huge amount of, you know, weaning off of that. And I gain autonomy as time goes and also as I earn it, right? But
mhm,
and when I say 2 years, like some guys it might be 3 years depending on like if a guy's just not getting it.
mhm.
If I need to go back and redo some of the work, some of the homework, things like that. But yeah, it's not literal boot camp, it's not a literal house arrest, but it's something like that because
Yeah.
I don't get to do things just based on how I want to do them.
Mm. At what point in that did you start to see hope that, hey, I might be on the right path here. I see a version of myself in the near future that is no longer in bondage. When did those wins start to pile up and you start to believe in the path that you were on?
Yeah. I saw hope when I started meeting these guys. I experienced hope like almost 2 years later. In the sense that like hope came home with me. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but like I didn't, because I would feel hope when I'd be at recovery.
Mm,
But then sometimes I'd leave that room and I don't know if I'm ever going to be like those guys though. 'Cause I still struggle and I still feel so triggered and like, yeah, I didn't act out the other day, but I wanted to so bad and it was so freaking hard not to. Like, I don't think I'm gonna last.
Mm,
It was almost 2 years into my program that I felt like, okay, it's been, a year and a half or whatever it's been, since I've looked at pornography, since I've been with another woman, like all these things. But I don't think I ever need to. Like I really think I can keep doing this. I can keep living life. And I could go back, but it would absolutely be a voluntary choice, which as I said earlier, it's always a voluntary choice. But what that year and a half did for me, and I mean, maybe it was a year and 9 months, but what that time did for me, it helped my limbic system to reset and to recognize like, yeah, if I'm watching, a video on YouTube and then an ad comes up that, in my past, I would just click that ad and I'd start watching this other thing. And, before I know it, I'm watching stuff that's wildly inappropriate, right? In the past, it felt like it was just boom, boom, boom. I can't help it. I'm just doing the wrong thing immediately. Now it's like, I could do that, but every single time that I push past a barrier, I would know it's me doing it. It's not my addiction. It's not sin. It's not the devil. It's Logan choosing to do the wrong thing. I am in control of whether or not I go back to my addiction.
mm,
So it was, yeah, it was a ways in that I really truly felt hope. Like I can live life differently. I do not have to live with sexually acting out.
mm. Do you how long have you been sober now?
May 19th, 2016. So yeah, coming up on 10 years here in a bit.
Do you feel free with an, like, asterisk by it? Or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm free from this, but I am always on guard. I
I
always
think
wonder that with any like sex addiction, with alcoholics, with drugs, that they're like, I've talked to people that have kind of walked through the recovery process, and they feel like, they got years and years under their belt of sobriety, but they're not like they don't I don't feel like they let their guard, maybe their guard's down a little bit, but I feel like they're always on watch because they've learned through this process of recovery how fast it can change. So that's why
right.
I say like free, am I free with an asterisk? Like I
Yeah.
am, but I'm not
No,
messing around with that.
I love how you put it, and honestly, that probably is how I describe it. Yeah, free with an asterisk. It sounds funny, but it's like, no, it's kinda true.
Yeah.
Because, man, I know. I've seen examples. I've seen a couple guys that have had years of recovery, that have gone back to their addiction. Now, at least in these couple examples, it's a very small sample size. In these couple examples, they did not go back and then just full on, now they're just back living in this total dark, depraved double life. They acted out, went back to their addiction, um, and then after a matter of like several weeks, you know, they're opening up to guys. Hey, here's what my life has been like, and so I don't want to minimize that. But number one, they still were able to tap back into that healthy infrastructure. But it's a reminder to me of like, yeah, those are guys that they have a lot of tools, they have a lot of healthy living, and they were still able to let their guard down. They were still able to get complacent,
Mm,
and I've gotten complacent. I've put myself in scenarios where I'm like, dude, that was stupid. What was I doing? And like, thankfully, yeah, I didn't then do something else, but I still put myself in a scenario. It just was not a good idea. Like I didn't have social media for a lot of years. Um, it was about 5 years ago, 4 years ago that I finally got Facebook for the first time in a while. I only got Instagram so that I can do recovery content on Instagram. And I have a lot of boundaries in place. I have a lot of accountability in place around, especially Instagram. Um, but yeah, like, I'll watch a reel and I'm like, no, I don't need to be watching this. It's like, maybe it's a cooking video, but it's like, the woman is dressed in a way that for me is like, I don't need to be looking at it. And I'll
Mm,
find a different cooking video to watch.
mhm,
But yeah, it's like I'm not proud of the fact that, for those 8 seconds or whatever it was, that I didn't make that choice sooner. But it's still, it's a reminder of like, yes, I can always struggle, but I can catch things now. Whereas before, 10 years ago, there was no, I don't know if I should quite be watching. I'm going to keep watching, and then I'm going to watch
mm.
another one, and then I'm going to watch something way worse, and, go on down the path.
Yeah, down the rabbit hole. So one of the things I wanted to find out too is the process of just rebuilding that trust with your wife, with your family. Uh, I've been on the other side of addiction. My dad had issues, my brother had issues, and a lot of hurt happens in that. And time kind of helps. But how did the trust begin to build back up for you and your wife once you found that traction? I assume it wasn't immediate. I assume that for her that there probably was a kind of guard built up. Like you said, she was already kind of at this like this numbness. It sounded like she was maybe working through recovery programs as well to help. But
Yeah.
at what point I asked you what you felt when you started to feel hope for yourself in the recovery process. When did you see the hope kind of rekindle with you and your wife and your relationship coming back together again?
Yeah. Well, and just to make it very, very clear. So yeah, she jumped into recovery just shortly after I did. For her, it was, yeah, the betrayal trauma healing. Part of the blessing of prodigals is both the Anchorage group, and then we have a Valley group now that I lead the men's side and she leads the women's side. There is a spouses side. And I shouldn't say spouses, because a lot of the women that go to her group don't have a man who goes to my group. They
Oh,
might be divorced, or they might have a guy that is still living in addiction. But it's a group for women who have been harmed by sexual betrayal trauma.
mm,
And that could be anything from pornography alone to everything I did, whatever. Um, so Carrie jumped into that, uh, about, yeah, 9 years ago, 9.5 years ago. Um, hope in our, I probably felt hope way sooner than I should have, to be totally
mm,
honest,
mm,
for our marriage. Because so, and one of the things we talk about in recovery is, super optimism, where I can have an unhealthy, super optimistic mindset of like, it'll all work out, no problems. I don't have to do any work. It'll be all good.
mm,
I don't know that I struggled with that too much with my own addiction recovery, but I did struggle with that with our marriage. We're like, oh yeah, I'm in recovery now and I haven't acted out. So yeah, like we're good, right? I think I was way too callous and of like how much work would need to be poured in.
mm,
Not just getting sober, but truly, me pouring into our relationship. Obviously, her continuing to pour into her own recovery, time. And then one of the hardest things for me, man, which has been a, one of the best ways for Carrie to heal, is for me to do the right thing, put my head down, do the right thing, and just not worry about what the results are today.
mm,
I want to try to fix and I want to correct it and fix it and do all these things and talk about it and whatever, so that we can try to get to an improved spot today. And that might sound really honorable, but realistically, that's so that I can have a more convenient,
mm,
spot in the relationship, or so that I can feel like I fixed something or whatever. So that's a hard thing too, of just giving her space to heal. Um, but yeah, I mean, it has been, it's been a tremendous journey, over this almost decade now. But it's been incredible. I mean, one example I often share, because it's kind of a weird one in a way, but I think it gives a great glimpse into what it can look like for us now. And this was actually several years ago, but we were about to share our testimony. I can't remember if this was for a recovery group or this might have been for our church. But we were going to share our testimony on stage in front of a lot of people. And it was something that we had done before, but it'd been a while. And so we were reading over our notes, and I had already revised, my testimony, and she had revised her testimony, and we were doing it together. And so we're kind of looking over our notes together. And there's this one spot, and I actually referenced it earlier in our conversation, where, it was like, I had confessed another affair. She's laying on the bathroom floor crying. And that was in her testimony. She was mentioning that. And we're sitting on our couch looking over notes. And she looks at me and she's like, she's pointing to that section. And she's like, okay, so do you think I should put a period there and then a new paragraph, or should I just do a semicolon and then like just kind of continue on? I don't remember exactly what grammar she was asking about, but like that's the idea, right? And in that moment, it felt like God gave me this like kind of out of body experience where he's like, dude, you're able to have a conversation about grammar with your wife, about one of the darkest things a wife can ever go through. And you guys can just sit and debate like the grammar or the sentence structure or whatever. Like that is an amazing blessing. And I said it, it's kind of weird because like, I don't want anybody to hear that and think that like that we're numb to this stuff. We're not numb to it. But what I've been able to experience is to see my wife fully cognizant of the destruction and the pain and the evil that I brought into our house. She does not minimize it, but it no longer wrenches her back into the past if she does think about something or something pops in or somebody makes a comment in a movie. Like a stand-up comedian could make a joke, or there's somebody makes a reference or something. Stuff like that could devastate her.
Mm.
Right? Somebody makes a joke about a hooker, and like that could ruin her day, right? Understandably.
Hmm.
Somebody makes a comment about their cousin who had an affair, that could ruin her day. And she still, again, is very sensitive, but it doesn't, pull her hair back and wrench her into this dark past automatically the way that it used to. So it's kind of a mirror image of both of our limbic systems resetting and healing in very different ways.
Mm.
We both can be triggered. Her in terms of past, right? And me in terms of, sexual temptation, but neither of us are slaves to those triggers.
Yeah, man. You both were going to church in the beginning of this, like in the very early stages. How's your and still struggling, like going to church but not doing, still caught up in addiction and in that turmoil, that chaotic time of your life. How has your relationship with God changed from those years, till to now? What have you learned more about or what have you learned about your faith through this whole process?
Yeah. We talked a little bit about my childhood, and like one of the things that I often share in my testimony is like I grew up going to church. I grew up knowing all the right things. I say that kind of as a joke, but like I mean that. Like I grew up believing many of the things that I believe to this day, which is like God created the universe and Jesus died for my sins, and I can go to heaven or I can go to hell, and if I don't trust in Jesus for my salvation, if I don't follow him, if I'm not a believer, I believed those things in my head. But I also knew my Bible, and I also knew like, well, the demons believe that too. So I very much felt this, like I was aware of my double life, and I'm like, I don't know what any of this means because I'm so screwed up. So
Mm.
I don't know how to be a Christian. I don't think I'm cut out for this. I believed that all of those things would be true for other people. I did not know that I was gonna make it. I didn't know if I could ever. I had this very warped and very incomplete view of God and my own spiritual life. Um, it was about 2 years into my program, so similar as I mentioned before in terms of like feeling freedom. It was maybe even a little bit after that. It was I'd almost graduated from the program. So it was like almost 2 years in where I felt like I can pray to God. I
Mm,
don't feel fixed. I don't feel healed past tense. I don't feel like I'm perfect, but I can pray. I can put my struggles out there to God. I can just talk to God. Before, prayer equaled me confessing to my sins to an angry dad.
mm,
Now, that's not a healthy view, right? That was my view of it. And so now it's like, okay, I can just talk to God. I can just put things out there. I can share how I'm feeling. And when I do sin, I get angry, whatever, like I can confess those things, and I can clean my slate, with God, and I don't have to live a double life. I don't have to, um, live in self-hatred and all these different things. But it's been a journey for the last like 7 years, 6 years of just trying to understand God more, and I'm like super not arrived in that way. But I mean, consistently just getting into the word and daily prayer. I mean, throughout the day, of just seeking what God has for me. Which some days I feel like I have more clarity than others, but yeah.
it's cool, man. I find myself having those like similar reflections on knowing in my head versus my heart how I view sin in my life and view God as a angry the angry dad or not.
Yeah.
That's I think that's a common I think that is a common um, struggle or thing to wrestle with. What is your advice to people that are listening that find themselves living the double life now or minimizing what they're going through? Or maybe they're convinced they're too far gone. What do you say to those type of people?
Well, I'm mostly going to answer that second part. I mean, the first part, somebody that might be living a double life, they might be grappling with this. I mean, it's kind of like what I talked about earlier with like, well, you got to identify where you're at.
Mhm.
And that, and part of that is going to include bringing in an outside person. And what that outside person can do, I guess, because I really didn't clarify it earlier. They can be lots of things. They can be a support structure. They can be somebody that can maybe point you to resources or be an ongoing resource. But what that outside person is they're not you. And so they could be a mirror. And that's a huge benefit. So, to somebody that is, yeah, that is maybe living a double life, there's not much I can say to you unless you want to change, right? Um, I'm not in the business of trying to convince anybody to come to prodigals, or to go to a therapist or to get clean. Like if you don't want it, then you don't want it. But to the second part of your question, if somebody feels like they're too far gone, I I don't say this from hubris. I say this from gratitude. I think that's why God put me on this earth, is to talk to other guys that feel that way, because that's the life that I lived. I spent years. I'm going to list some things out, and I'm going to say them, a little bit fast, but like understand these are coming from the bottom of my heart. I hated that Carrie had me for a husband. I loved Carrie. And I wanted desperately to be a good husband to her, but I couldn't figure out how to freaking stop this. And so I hated that she got stuck with me. I hated that my kids had me for a dad. I loved my kids. I didn't know how to do anything other than just screw up constantly, or so it seemed. I hated the fact that they had such a crappy role model for a father. Um, I knew that I was just bringing so much pain, on everyone around me, and I hated that. I wanted desperately for God to just take me off of this earth. If I could have never been created, if I could have signed up for that, I would have done that in a snap. Just take away my existence.
Mm.
Um, I absolutely felt like I was too far gone. Um, so to somebody like that, That's where, we're going full circle here. But like we said at the start of this, there are other people that share your struggle. There are other people who have done similar things, that have gone down just as dark of paths that you've gone down. And I promise you, some of those people, not all of them, some of those people are experiencing life outside of that cave, and they are thriving, and they have transformed lives, and they're no longer in bondage to that. And, I say this constantly about myself, man. I am not perfect, but I'm authentic. My life is not perfect, but it's authentic, you know, and I can love my wife and I can love my boys absolutely not perfectly, but I can do it as a real person. And what it took for me was not making some tweaks or introducing, the top 3 habits that can help your life. I needed for my life to be totally stripped down, like an old decrepit house that, like, you strip it down to the studs, or maybe in my case, man, you took that thing all the way down to the foundation and you just built a new house brick by brick. Like, that's what my life was, is, that program, that house arrest for 2 years, that autonomy getting taken away. It wasn't for no reason. It was so that I could learn to live life starting from scratch almost.
Hmm.
New routines, new habits, new ways of enjoying hobbies, new ways of experiencing life with friends, new relationship with people around me, far outside of just myself and Carrie and things like that. Just a new way of experiencing life. But it took so much time, and it took so much me giving away freedoms, and
Hmm.
being willing to do that. But I I I would say this, and I don't say this lightly, but I mean, scripture makes this clear, and I believe in this, and I'm a testament to this. My life is, if I seek healing, if I seek healthy resources, if I seek wisdom, if I seek true accountability, I will find it. Now, it might take a while, and I might have to do more searching than I'm comfortable with. It probably will take more. But if you are struggling and you, like, truly, truly go on a mission to seek those things, I promise you those doors will become opened and you will find true accountability. You will find healing. It might be with prodigals or a group like prodigals, right? There's a very likely chance that it's going to be something different. But some of these principles that we've talked about, people speaking into your life, getting feedback, having people that care about you and know you, but they also care about you enough to call you out on your crap.
Hmm.
That all of that applies whether you're struggling with sexual addiction, or you have an eating disorder, or you want to be a better dad, or you want to be a better wife, or you want to be a better employee, right? Like, all of those principles apply. They I think it's fair to say, like, they carried um maybe more weight. The stakes were higher with sexual addiction, but the principles are there.
Yeah. That's cool that you use yourself as the example to, to speak to, being too far gone, that you were that person that thought that you were. And the fact that you have found what you have through just this grueling process of of recovery and of pain and heartache and all the family turmoil that you've come to the other side of that. And I think it's so cool for the person that may feel that way to see an example in you, that there is life outside the cave. And that's a super cool. I do love that that metaphor, because it gives so much hope, man, and it paints such a good picture of people do feel like they're all just kind of trapped inside, and then there are people living on the outside that have found a way to actually live,
Yeah.
and that's so powerful. As far as what you're doing now, you you have your Instagram no longer in bondage. That's where people can follow you to kind of keep up with your journey and this topic specifically. You mentioned a couple resources already. Prodigals, which sounds like is in Anchorage and in the Valley.
Yep.
Um, we talked about AA as maybe a starting. I know there's like NA, AA. There's other
Yeah.
program, Celebrate Recovery. For Alaskans listening, kind of give me your top three resources that
Yeah,
you tell people to go to.
yeah, because I do. I mean, like I said earlier, like I've been blessed to be on many many podcasts. I've never done it with somebody on an Alaskan podcast, so I
Mm,
want to lean into that
yeah,
because anybody listening right now, you have an opportunity to you have an opportunity that nobody else, in an audience that I've been blessed to talk to has, and that's no small thing. I mean, I've been able to have conversations with people on Instagram from literally all over the world, from multiple continents, multiple countries, and if you're listening to this right now, man, you can reach out and find a group, find somebody, whether it's me or somebody else, potentially in a group either in your city or within a couple hours. So that's huge.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, Prodigals is a group for men who struggle with sexual addiction. We're looking for healing in sexual addiction. You don't have to be a Christian. You're going to hear about God. You're going to hear about Christ, but you don't have to be a Christian to attend. You don't have to be a member of a church. So there's actually three groups now. There's two. There's a group that meets on 2 different days of the week in Anchorage, on Tuesday and on Thursday. And then my group, which Rick started, and then I took over when he moved away a few years ago. We meet on Monday nights out here in the valley at Creekside Church. The Tuesday night Prodigals group has a sister group, which is Partners in Process, and that's the group that is for a woman who has been harmed with betrayal trauma. And then the Monday night group also, my wife leads that one. So the Thursday night is guys only. So that's gigantic. So if you're in Anchorage, if you're in the valley, if you're close at all, absolutely go to one of those groups. You can also reach out to me. I'm just gonna say, Instagram is gonna be best. If you do not have Instagram, get a hold of Manny. And if you're looking for resources, I mean, I don't mind if it's a case by case basis. You can give out my number. If somebody wants to get resources. Um, so yeah, if you're in Fairbanks, if you're down in Seward, if you're on the peninsula, something like that, um, reach out to me that way, either Instagram or get a hold of Manny. But I would, yeah, circle back to what I said in terms of a group that is already an infrastructure for recovery is better than no group. It might be something where you're just there temporarily, and maybe you find a permanent home somewhere else. Um, the only non-group resource I want to make sure to put out there, because man, it is the number one resource that I know of in terms of educating yourself on sexual addiction and betrayal trauma and what it does. Um, I'm not super big into recommending books and YouTube videos and series and stuff, just because I think the tendency is it's really easy to absorb that stuff and not do anything about it.
mm,
Um, but if there is value in education, right? And so if you want to absorb some knowledge, the Conquer series, literally, if you Google the Conquer series, it'll come right up. Ted Roberts puts that on. It's several hours. It's like 7 hours maybe total. But in terms of just one-way education, as opposed to a group, right? It's the best resource I know of to learn about sexual addiction, what it does to your brain, what it does to your body. It is a Christ-centered resource. And so it's going to talk about the spiritual aspect. But again, if you're an atheist, I promise you, watch this video series and you will learn a ton, because it looks at the spiritual, looks at the scientific, and it looks at the practical,
mm,
which those are the three pillars that Prodigals is founded on too. I can learn all kinds of science stuff. That's awesome. But that by itself doesn't change the heart, right? And I can
mm,
learn all about the spiritual. That's great, but that doesn't matter if I don't change what I'm doing tonight or tomorrow. And so the
mm.
practical needs to be in there too. So it's all three of those things. The Conquer series is an incredible resource for education.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll link that. I'll link that in the show notes as well. So some of these other resources we've talked about. Um, man, thank you so much for sharing this story. It's such a I think about going into the new year, and people are it's probably in the back of their head, like, maybe this will be the year that, I change, that I find hope if this is something that they're struggling with, and especially if they're here where we live in Alaska, knowing that there's a resource like that you found, in our state. that has worked tremendously for you, and you found this community, people outside the cave, living life. I mean, there's a lot of hope in that, and I hope people find that in this conversation. Man, thank you for just laying it all out. It's I know you're used to talking about this, but again, to have a vulnerable topic, something that is not often talked about, shared
Yeah.
like this, is I think really powerful. And so I'm so glad we got to do this, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I
Is there
appreciate very much having me on.
anything we missed? Anything you want to cover before we head out?
I always feel a little bit obligated to say something, when I get asked that question, because there's always stuff, right? The one
Right.
yeah, there is one thing that kinda jumps out at me. You've talked about, what if somebody feels like they're too far gone, right? Or as you said, "This is the year where I'm gonna finally reach out for
Yep.
help." I'm gonna say this: if you are feeling brokenness, if you are feeling desperation, that is one of the biggest blessings that you can have. And that might sound like, well, what the heck does that mean? Or that's easy for Logan to say. Well, number one, I've been there. So I'm not speaking from a place that I didn't live, right? The scariest place for me to be at, if I'm an addict, is for me to feel comfortable, is for me to feel complacent, is for me to feel like, you know, I don't think it's that bad. I don't think my wife's ever going to leave me. I don't think anyone's going to find out. I don't think I'm ever going to go beyond porn. Like whatever lie I might tell myself. So if I'm feeling pain and desperation, that's good because that can be the biggest motivation that drives me. That's incredible fuel. It sucks to feel it. It absolutely sucks. But I can tell you, I felt desperation, I felt brokenness, and there was no resources in sight, and that was awful. But
Mm.
once those resources were in sight, it didn't make it easy, but it did make it easier because it was like, okay, now there's fuel that I can, put in this combustible engine and I can actually go places because I don't want to feel this brokenness any more than I have to. So lean into that. Know that that is a gift.
Awesome. Let it be the catalyst. Connect that pain um, to change, with those
Yeah.
resources. Well, Logan, thank you so much again. I appreciate your time. Nothing but the best to you and Carrie and your family going into this new year. And thanks for spending your evening with me, man.
Manny, thank you. Appreciate it.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider supporting the show by joining me on social media. Each week, I share the most thought provoking, jaw dropping, or just interesting moments from conversations just like you heard today. I'm currently on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at The State I Am In Podcast. Engaging with me on social media by liking, sharing, reposting, and commenting what you think is a simple and cost free way to help other Alaskans and people everywhere find these conversations. You can also subscribe on YouTube and wherever you're listening to podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Apple, or iHeartRadio, wherever. Be sure to leave a review. These small actions really do make a huge difference. I'm committed to growing the state I'm in by sharing thoughtful, honest conversations and voices from all across Alaska. And if you or someone you know has a story that reflects Alaska beyond the postcards, gift shops, and tourist traps, I'd love to hear from you. This show exists because of the incredible Alaskans with a story to share, and I would love to take the opportunity to sit down and discuss what real life here looks like. Now, more than ever, I believe sharing the voices of our fellow Alaskans truly matters, and I will continue to do this work for as long as there are people willing to sit down and share meaningful conversations. Keep North Alaska, and thank you for joining me on The State I Am In.